So the first thing I want to ask, I've been asking everybody, is how are you? How has the year been for you? Because I know, along with working with multiple executives, you've also changed roles in the past year. So how has it been?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. I think personally, I think I'm doing pretty okay. I mean, I've seen people who've I think been more closely impacted by the pandemic and everything that's happened, and I think I've escaped relatively unscathed, and I'm very grateful for that. It's definitely been a challenging year. I think we didn't any of us realize how much we relied on those social interactions in the office and just those quick coffee chats with people or meeting somebody on the way to the printer. It was so much a part of the fabric of our day, and I don't think we realized how important it was until it was gone. It was definitely that case for me. But yeah, as you mentioned, during the year, I mean, I had friends and family say, "Are you absolutely nuts? You're changing jobs in the middle of a pandemic." But it's like, oh well, why not? Keep life interesting. So a fantastic opportunity came my way to join Salesforce, which is a company that's been on my radar for a long time, and I absolutely leapt at it. And I joined in May fully remotely. So for the first several months of the role, actually, it was October before I met anybody in person. So I
Wow.
worked from May until October fully remotely and virtual onboarding, which is absolutely doable, and I think everybody's realizing that it is very possible to do that. Everybody thought, no, how can you have somebody new and train them and get them into systems and understanding their roles when you're not sitting beside them? It takes a lot more effort, but it's very, very possible to do it. So it's definitely been an interesting year for me. Lots of change, lots of new learnings, and yeah, I have to say it was definitely the right decision. Everybody who told me, "You're nuts, why are you doing this? Have you not got enough stress in your life?" I actually think it's probably one of the reasons why my year has been quite good, because I had something very positive to focus my energy on. So it was great to be able to throw myself into that new role.
And how many executives are you supporting at the moment in your new role?
So I'm supporting two. My first year in Salesforce, I also supported two, and I recently changed roles again. I've moved departments and I have two. So I've got two vice presidents, one based in Ireland and one based in the UK. And the one who's based in the UK, she has people reporting to her across all of EMEA and in Asia Pac and in Sydney. So I'm having lots of fun with time zones, I can tell
I
you
can
that.
imagine.
Yeah.
Time Zone Ninja is the tool. I tell
Absolutely.
everybody, go and use Time Zone Ninja. It's the only
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And just to give our listeners some perspective, in the past, you've managed a greater number than two.
Oh, I
Um,
have. I have indeed. I mean, at one time I had four, but I consistently had three for quite a long number of years. So I was used to juggling three. So two actually feels great.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's dive into the topic because, as I said, I've spoke to you about this on a number of occasions before, and there are so many tips and tricks you can offer assistants. So, one of the first things I wanted to talk to you about, and I think you probably would have just gone through this process being in the role, the new role, is laying kind of ground rules for how you are going to work with both executives, and then in your case now, how the three of you going to work together. Now,
Yeah.
in terms of that generally, I know that's really important. So could you touch on that? And then in terms of working remotely, does that become something that's much more important or the same level of importance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you said, setting that framework in the first instance is how you're going to set yourself up for success when you're looking after more than one executive, because invariably at one point or another their needs or their requirements are going to overlap or clash, and you need to be really clear from the get-go what you're doing. So what I've always done when, particularly when you start a new role, it's the perfect opportunity to start with a clean slate and to really put something in place. And that's really working out, first off, how does each of your executives work, what their hours are like, what how they like to spend their day. You've got people that maybe they want to do their deep work in the morning, and then you've got others that want to do it in the afternoon. They spend do their calls in the morning and have the time in the afternoon for thinking and doing. Understanding how they want to work and how they structure their time and how they work best is absolutely essential from the get-go. But it's really important to remember you yourself as well, and have that conversation with them about, well, I'm a morning person, I'm a night owl, whatever it is, so that everybody's really on the same page about what to expect from each other in terms of the day, and what that will look like. When you have two, I think you have that conversation, or more. It can be, obviously more than two, but when you have the conversation with each of your executives and understand, okay, this is the support that this person needs within these hours or within these hours, and this is how I want to structure it. You then need to be very clear with both of them how you're working with the other. So, for example, if you have one of your VPs who has lots of early morning calls or meetings, and they want you to be part of those, the other executive needs to know that between those hours or that chunk of time that you're going to be working on the other person, and the fact that they can't reach you doesn't mean you're not available or you're not working, but that you're doing something else. I think having both of them aware of what they're doing, and the division of time is important too, because what I've had in the past, sometimes you have two people who are peers, and it's a 50-50 split of your time, and that's very clear kind of up front. In some instances, you might, when I've had three at one point, where one of the three reported into one of the others. So that meant one of them sort of had a heavier weighting in terms of the time that they got from me and what their requirements were. And that was sort of understood by that person who reported in, that, they would get as much time as I was available to give them. But if the other person needed me, then that had to be the priority. So I think that's really part of the conversation that you need to have, and really lay that out, lay that framework. When it comes to working remotely, I think where it can become challenging is that people's approaches and their schedules have to change in their mindset. So, for example, the people that maybe are the early morning calls and the early morning meetings, that mightn't necessarily be possible for them anymore when they're juggling home stuff. So what you really need to do is revisit that conversation and understand, what are their home commitments? What commitments they have with family? One of my executives now likes to walk the kids to school every day. Actually, now that I think of it, both of them, but just at different times. They have different staggered schedules. So making sure that okay, for that hour in the morning, that's family time. So nothing can go in there, and really protect their time and protect their headspace so that they can work in the way that they need to. Because let's face it, we're all stressed. Our work and home lives are bleeding together at the moment, and having it really clear definition between that's my personal time and that doesn't get touched, it just helps to avoid stress and frustration. And so working remotely, I think that is the really big thing, is just plug in all of the home stuff, and plug in all the breaks that you need as well. Because I think we can all fall into a trap of working remotely, that you feel like you have to be in front of the laptop all day, and you're not stepping away and taking the breaks that you should. And that's the same for your execs. So making sure that they're taking time, building in the time for their lunch or their breaks, so they're being able to just walk away, get out for a walk, get some headspace, and come back fresh. That would be absolutely critical. Yeah.
There's so many interesting points that you've made there, and I know so many assistants will be listening and nodding along. The first one I wanted to bring up was it's becoming very important that assistants use their calendars, because that's the only visibility their executives have to know what they're doing, and a quick reference. So I think when you work with multiple executives, it becomes even more important now, that, as you were saying, that you put in to your schedule your home stuff when you're working with the other executive, so that the executive doesn't have to really even phone you to find out where you are. I know so many assistants can not use their calendar because they use they're in their executives so much, but it works as a communication tool.
Absolutely. I would agree completely. And I think historically, I wouldn't have really put my personal stuff into my work calendar because I never really needed to. And to be honest, the only thing that really was in my calendar, well, whatever meetings I needed to be at myself, but a lot of times it was room bookings and so on and so forth, things that you don't really need to think about. But now you're absolutely right. You need to block in your own time. So one of the first things I did was, when I went to remote working and when I started the new job, was just deciding, right, what time do I want to more or less aim for a lunch break every day? What time do I want to start? What time do I want to finish? And plugging that in, and depending on what tool you're using, I'm sure Outlook has it. I know Gmail definitely does. You can set your working hours so that, if anybody tries to put something outside of those hours, it shows that it's outside the working hours and alerts them to that. So, for example, I have colleagues in San Francisco, so if they try to put something in at 6 p.m., they know that's technically outside of my working hours, but if they flag it to me, then I can work around it. So you're absolutely right. Using your own calendar to lock in your own time, absolutely critical. And, being careful to take the times. I know that the problem at the moment for a lot of assistants, I think, are experiencing this, is that the lack of visibility for them and what they're doing for their role, because they're not seen, because we're all working from home, and that fear. So it's very easy to tie yourself to the desk because you want to answer everything instantly. You want to be available on whatever instant messaging system or whatever's going on so that people know that you're always there. But you will burn out very, very quickly if you try to do that. So you need to be aware of your own energy levels and your own motivation as well. And if you feel like, you know what, I'm really struggling, take half an hour, lock it in your calendar, step away, take a break, and come back at it. It's absolutely critical. Yeah.
It's so important at the moment. It's exactly like you said, the visibility issue is a big issue. And there are lots of other ways to get around that than just being at your computer all the time.
Absolutely.
I know it's so difficult for assistants, but there are other things you can be doing to show visibility without just answering and being at your desk the entire time. I think something else you said, I was just say something else you said there, Natalie, which I thought was really interesting, because we can effectively pick our own times now, particularly senior executives are able to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
For assistants, if you are working with multiple executives and one is a morning person and one is a night owl, again, it doesn't mean that you have to be up in the morning with the morning person and up at night with the night owl. You get to also have some kind of flexibility around the hours that you work and what works best for you.
Yeah, 100%. And that's so important to keep in mind as well. And it's funny, as I've just moved roles in the last few weeks, one of my execs is very much in the morning because of the APAC element of her business. And that's actually something that she even said to me. She said, by the way, just because I need to be up and doing all of this, that doesn't mean that you need to be on and available at that time. I don't have that expectation. And that is really important to know that you don't need to try and stretch yourself really thin. What I found the best way is if you do have those that are sort of on a staggered time, if some of them need your help in the morning, actually divide your week. So say, okay, if Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm going to do the earlies, Wednesday, let's see how it goes. Thursday, Friday, I'll do the lates, or swap it around and have the freedom to build your schedule as possible. But absolutely, it's going back to the point before about not trying to be on all the time, but to use your time wisely in the same way that you want to make your executives really effective and make sure they're spending their time on the right things. You need to do that for yourself as well.
Yeah, and quite a lot of the time it's walking the talk, isn't it? Because you're asking your executive to do this. You also have to manage your own time, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to come on, now that you're working in tech as well, a very fast-paced world of Salesforce. I know, having spoke to other assistants that work at Salesforce, it's fast-paced. So I wanted to touch on the technology that you've been embracing really over the last year and a bit to help you manage the multiple executives that you work with.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you're right. It's so fast paced, and it's actually really nice to be back in the tech world. I mean, I spent a long number of years in the tech world before I sort of meandered a little bit in between and dipped my toe into some other industries. But things move so quickly, and you just need to be organized and on it. And what I think this year, particularly remotely, is becoming more comfortable with video calls, because as much as I was comfortable before, I could, schedule a video conference down the yin yang and get them started and get them all sorted. Never really had to be on them myself, and getting comfortable with that and just say, rather than getting fixated with looking yourself in the screen and going, oh God, is that what I look like? But actually just being able to focus. So I think that has really helped as well with the connection, with relationship building, with visibility, being on a call. And I would say, if you're on video calls, I still know quite a few people, quite a few colleagues, they'll join a video call, but they'll leave their camera turned off because they still haven't really gotten really comfortable. Or do you know what? Sometimes there's a little bit of camera fatigue because all of our interactions, even our personal ones, went virtual over the past year and a half. So sometimes it's like, I just can't be on another video call. I'm just going to turn my camera off and I'm going to hover in the background. I would say as an assistant, whether it be, team meetings, whether it's one-to-ones with your executive, always have your camera on, always be present, always make that connection, and it will help with that feeling that you're not visible. Just actually let them see that you're there and that you're fully engaged. So that's really been critical for the past year, particularly as I onboarded remotely and I needed to try and make connections and build relationships in a company where I wasn't sitting in an office with anybody. I mean, to this day, I still haven't stood inside a Salesforce office, which is nuts.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So when the offices reopen, I'm going to be the first one at the top of the queue wanting to get in. I'm going to be like a kid in a candy shop. Absolutely.
Getting you free coffee.
Absolutely. And I think having the opportunity to actually see people, even though I couldn't, meet them in person, making those connections and having those chats with people early on to build the relationships was really, really critical. One of the things that I've depended on really heavily over the past year is instant messaging tools, whether that was Google Chat at one point. Now we're, very heavily using Slack as well. So using those really effectively for communicating within the teams and keeping up to speed with what's happening, but also for throughout the days with your executives. It's been really important for me for those quick questions, for them to kind of flag something really quickly, and just having that there has been so easy because you don't have the possibility to pop your head around the door of the office with a quick question, or to grab somebody on their way past your desk and go, oh, while I have you. So using those tools to really help you be more effective and just stay on top of stuff has been essential for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've just heard this so much over the year, last year, how many assistants now were reluctant to use things like WhatsApp or even in some cases Facebook Messenger, because it felt like that was an invasion on their private time. But now I notice that assistants are really embracing like voice memos or quick emojis and things like that just get that communication going when everybody is so busy at the moment. I think it's something that assistants are really embracing for sure, and that will continue.
Oh no, I definitely think it will. And I think all of those things that have, developed and become more effective. And I think, like you said, even emojis, that's something quite interesting, because with using Slack, one of the things that it's very easy to get lost in the noise. And then, if your exec sends you a message and go, oh, can you set this up, or, can you help with this, or what's happening with that project? Sometimes you don't actually need to type a response. And it's very easy if they've got stuff coming at them in lots of different channels or from lots of different people, it's easy to lose that. So we even adopted a little emoji etiquette where, if I got pinged something that, I needed to go off and work on, that I put a little emoji that would let them know that I'd seen it and that I was working on it. And then there was another one that we'd agreed that I'd use then when it was done. So they'd look and go, yeah, that's under control, that's sorted. So it was just for really speedy communication at a glance. And just by setting that up in the beginning and saying, okay, here's how we're going to use this. So, if I need to action, it's this or whatever, and making it really easy to see at a glance what's happening. So that's been really helpful. And I think that will continue and evolve for sure.
Mm-hmm. And just in terms of technology, particularly as you're new in your role as well, and I know at Salesforce it's a tech company, but it's a technical company as well. So
Absolutely.
There must have been a lot of learning you've had to do recently. And I wonder if you've found being in the places that your executive are in communicating with their teams, if that's helped speed up your business acumen.
Oh, 100%. 100%. That's one of the things that I found. I would always try to become very involved in what was happening with the executives, sit in on meetings and if you have access to their email, which I think a lot of executive assistants will have access to their exec's email, really reading stuff and really getting a chance to understand what the business priorities are, what the goals are, and really learn that company, learn what you're doing, learn their role. That's been really, really important for me. I had a lot of training and upskilling on systems that I'd never used before. So that was one thing. But I from the beginning of, back in May, sitting in on business reviews, where, offering to sit in on meetings and to really learn about the business and learn about the individuals. That's the other thing about being in a large tech organization, that once you're in, it's not all the same everywhere. there's different types of roles and the different, from your marketing, from your PR, from your sales and so on. And then then the very technical end of it, the product development, everybody has a slightly different experience and everybody's using maybe some of the same tools, but using them in slightly different ways, and really immersing into how the team and how your executives are using those things is absolutely essential for building the business acumen and really getting up to speed quickly. I think that helped me because I wasn't in the office, and the stuff that you would normally absorb in a new job, sitting with your colleagues around you and quick questions, not being in a position to do that meant that I really had to push myself forward to go, well, I want to learn and I want to get really immersed. The only way I'm going to do that is if I really step up and say, right, can I join this? Can I join this? Can I sit in on this? And what I've found is, and I found it in past roles in previous companies as well, that's generally very well received, that they see that you really want to be involved and to do more than wait for them to give you tasks or ask you to do stuff, that you really want to take an active hand and see where you can add more value.
And it's speaking the same language as well, isn't it? Again, it's building that rapport, making sure that you and your boss or your executives are synced via the use of the same language, which you can pick up so much easier in ways now because we're all using online collaboration tools, and it's That's there true. For assistants to learn from, rather than having to get into the meetings and learn that way. I think it makes it much more accessible for assistants to increase skills.
Completely. And I do think as well that in the move to being remote, I think meetings themselves seem to have been a bit more flexible in the approach. Whereas previously there might be meetings, people go, well, why would you want to sit in that? Why would you want to be in a boardroom for the whole day with people? I mean, what value is there really in it for you? What are you getting out of it? What are you giving? What value are you adding? Whereas now you've got people randomly. I mean, it's happened. I've seen it a lot over the past year that there's meetings planned and scheduled. And then someone said, you know what? I'm really interested in that particular topic that I know is on the agenda. Any chance I can just sit in and be a fly on the wall? And that's so much more acceptable and kind of like, oh yeah, great. The more the merrier. In a way that if you were all together in a boardroom for the day, that it probably would have been a little bit like, really? Why? So it's an opportunity. It definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah, it levels the playing field, I think, and makes the board much more accessible.
Yeah.
For everybody, for sure.
Absolutely.
I want to talk on some of the key issues around working with multiple executives. And the first one that always springs to mind for me is communication. I know we've touched on that a little bit, but I wondered if you could share some advice with assistants that you've either done in the past or you're doing at the moment on how you go about communicating all of the priorities that you have and that your executives have, so that things aren't getting dropped and that you're able to work with them both effectively.
Absolutely. I've always been in favor of a daily catch up with the execs. Now that's a little bit tougher to juggle at the moment because people have more demands on their time, but it's doable to have even 15 minutes, either at the beginning or the end of each day, depending on what's going to suit the exec best. But a check-in to really, to make sure you know what they need from you. So really clear expectations, but also that you can really lay out for them what you're working on for them and where the progress is and what's happening, but also what's happening with the other exec that you're supporting. Sometimes you'll be lucky and maybe they'll somehow be in the same world, the same realm, and they'll sort of get it. They'll understand, oh yeah, I know that they need that. Sometimes it'll be completely different and you're going to need to really make that clear where your commitments are. I think if you end up with competing demands on your time, or maybe there's competing deadlines, and I think in a lot of cases, if you have taken that time to really build that business acumen, to understand the goals and priorities, sit in as much as you can, you will know where the priority is. You'll know which one is more important than the other. But sometimes that's not enough, and sometimes you're going to need to sit with both of them, and whether that be individually or together, and say, okay, so here's what you both need from me. It's absolutely doable, but not in the same time frame. So something needs to move, and what can that be? What can slide? I mean, I think the advice I would always say is, don't ever flat out say it's a no, I can't do it, or that's not going to work. It's always a case of, well, I can't do that right now, and here's why. What about this? Come with the suggestion so that one doesn't feel like they're getting shut down, particularly if you've got the situation where one is more senior than the other, and maybe naturally gets a little bit more of your time. You don't want the other executive to feel like, oh, well, I'm never going to get the support that I need. If you're really clear about, well, here's what I'm working on and here's where those priorities are. So here's when I can get to your thing, or maybe can that deadline change or move? I think those daily meetings with those are really, really important to have those types of conversations. And if there's an issue and you can't resolve it, or there's a clash that you need them both, put them both together. Like, let's face it, whether the 2 or 3 or however many it is, you have their schedules, you have their calendars, so you can maneuver it to make sure that they get together. But one thing that, those daily meetings for me have always been critical, because it's just a really touch point. If you find that that's not working, one thing that worked well for me during the year, when there was particular times where people maybe had a little bit more of a personal drain on their time and they didn't have enough time to really sit in all of those meetings, was a shared document together, where dropping stuff in and having conversations, and the question that maybe you can't get to answer them, and ask them a question, or maybe you send them an instant message but that they're focusing on something else, so they're just not going to see it. Tag them in that document and say, here's something I need from you, or here's a question I need answered because there's an impending deadline, or I now have a clash with this, and let me know what the priority is. Having that almost a stream of consciousness level of conversation with both of them, or I keep saying both because it's 2 for me, but just making sure that everybody is always on the same page is a bottom line. So use every tool that you have to make it as effective as possible. Like you mentioned WhatsApp earlier. I know some execs that actually love that. So they will say, well, if I'm in video calls all day, I'm not necessarily going to be looking at my Slack. I'm not necessarily going to be looking at my email or whatever. So if you need me to answer immediately, or you need to let me know about something immediately, send me a WhatsApp. And I will always pick that up. That will always be the critical thing. So that, again, I think that kind of ties back into the framework, and maybe agreeing early on, or, if you're trying to start fresh in a situation, you want to really, get to a good point with working remotely and really clean the decks. Build that into how you're going to work together. Build that into your communications. Like, okay, how do we keep each other informed? How do we make sure that we're on the same page, and agree that up front? What's the one critical form of communication that's always the urgent one, that always gets responded to?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's some really important points there. Absolutely. Communication is so vital. And I think one of the things you said there, which I think is a really good piece of advice, is that make sure that both executives are aware of where you are, and get them very comfortable that they are going to see each other's work. Because I've had executives in the past that I've worked for who were in different departments and didn't really want the other executive to know what I was working on. For one executive, and why are you CCing him in? He doesn't need to see it. And it was exactly, you need to get comfortable with that, because there's only one of me, and you both need to see what I'm working on, so that the other one, maybe if something's not urgent, it can wait.
100%. And, that's absolutely critical early on. And, as you said, like CCing in, like there are some things that, I've seen as well, that some execs like absolutely don't want shared. They're like, well, I don't want everybody to see what I'm working on, or no, I don't want to share my calendar. I don't want people to be able to see. But, if you in broad strokes can actually lay out, well, do you know what? These are the priorities for that department, and this is what I'm working on. It's going to be really helpful. But again, it's about getting that partnership going, that everybody's comfortable working together, that everybody's communicating and everyone's on the same page, and that nobody feels their needs are being ignored is the important thing. I talked about this before with some executive assistants, and it's, when you manage more than one executive, you want them all to feel that they have an equal share of your time. But often that's absolutely not the case. Often there are things that you're absolutely going to have to prioritize, but it is about trying to give them that impression of everything's under control, it's handled. And you will find that, if an executive wants something in a particular time frame and you can't deliver because you have another priority, they often will be okay with moving it, as long as they understand why. It's not a case of, my thing is less important. It's like, no, it's like, this is absolutely critical. This is mission critical, but then your thing is next. And they'll often be fine with that. And it's all about that communication. Yeah. Can't overstress the importance.
It swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Sometimes you're more, you're busy with one executive. Sometimes you're busy with another. It's just, the nature of business.
100%.
I would imagine that there are some new skills that have come up for you this year, and I wondered what skills you've relied on this year to help manage the executives that you work with.
Yeah, I think one of the really one that I probably wouldn't have needed to really be very aware of before is self-awareness of my own time and my own energy, because so much of that will feed into how successful everything is and keeping everything together. And actually, when you're getting up and you have your commute and you go to the office, and as you've got your game face on, you're at work, you're focused. When you're at home, sometimes that's tougher, and you've got those days where your energy is low or things aren't great, particularly with the pandemic and everything that's happened for everybody in the past year or more. So I think actually being more aware of myself and that comes down to setting deadlines, setting the expectations for things. Whereas, under normal circumstance, you'd be like, yeah, you need me to do that. Yeah, no problem. I'll have that by the end of the day. Actually realizing, do you know what, that actually isn't going to work. So do you know what, I'll have that for you tomorrow. And setting the correct expectations based on being realistic with yourself and your own energy and your own time and what you can do. Because what I found is the absolute worst thing you can do is start missing deadlines or missing commitments and not delivering on what you've promised. The absolute critical thing is when you say you're going to do something, you deliver on it. Because I think particularly in this remote world, trust can be a real issue for some managers who've never had to work like this before. And depending on the industry you're in and the type of company you're in that haven't had the idea of remote work before. I know one executive I worked for in the past believed that if anybody wanted a day to work from home, that meant that they wanted a DOS day. They wanted a day where they didn't have to do anything really because nobody could see them. And you
That
need to
sounds
combat
familiar.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you really need to be able to combat that feeling and build the trust with those executives that I'm here, I'm working, I'm doing what I need to do. So being realistic when you're setting deadlines and making commitments is absolutely critical. So for that was managing my own energy and being realistic about my own time. I think we've talked about it so much, but I think really focusing on the comms and really, really upping my game there has been important this year when we're not there and we're not in the same place. Just making sure that I'm here and that they know that if there's anything extra that's needed, that I'm visible, I'm here, and that I'm aware, and keeping all those plates spinning, like all of the people that you need to talk to. If you're working on projects with multiple stakeholders and multiple people involved, keeping all those connection points and being that more than ever, being the one who's herding all the cats and having it all together. That's been something that's been really, really critical with working remotely for me.